Yes, indeed. It's Let's Talk. Call-in radio. This is Let's Talk, getting to the root causes of the important issues of the day. This on-the-air community forum believes your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment. Please join today's conversation by calling 415-663-8492 or 8317 if the other line is busy, or tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR. And when you call in, you'll hear a funny noise as I put you in the system. Please hang on until you hear me say you're on the air, and then give us your first name. Turn your radio down. And please, watch your language. Keep it clean, people. And today, purely by chance, not precipitated by the awful events in Las Vegas, we're talking about fear, and that just happened to come along. And we're talking about fears, irrational, rational, phobias. What are you afraid of? What do you fear most? What do Americans fear most?
How deep do I need to deep? How deep do I need to dig?
Fear of sounding foolish on the radio?
I'm afraid of English.
Exactly.
And joining moi, I am Paul Raffel, by the way. Shelley Rugg.
Hello.
Back again. Stephen Hurwitz.
Making all the errors today.
This is good. Someone's got to do it. And Charles Schultz is here.
Hello.
And so I've been asking people randomly, what are you afraid of? And actually I picked up Merrill this morning, gave him a ride into town, and he said he's not afraid of anything, except maybe when he's walking up on the back hill and he's a little worried about mountain lions.
I had that the other night. I was walking down from the Zimmerman Ranch to my place, and mostly skunks I had to dodge. But I did think for a second, maybe a mountain lion. Skunks wouldn't be any fun either.
Can't read this.
Oh, gracious.
What's that?
I
don't know.
663-84. Oh, yeah. 663-8492. What are you afraid of?
What do you think America's afraid of? It's been kind of interesting. There was a survey done. This was what really made me want to do this, is that there was a new survey came out, pretty small group, I have to say, 1,000 people, I think, from all 50 states. So what are we talking, 20 people in each state? I don't know. But apparently fears have changed a little bit. So the top 4 fears for men and women alike were developing cancer, getting in a car wreck, developing heart disease, and having a stroke. And the next one was being a victim of identity theft. Whereas, back in 2015, corruption of government officials was top of the line. Interesting, eh? Cyber terrorism, corporate tracking of personal information. I think we've all given up on that one. I think we're all accepting that now. Terrorist attacks was number 4 back then. Government tracking of personal information. So there was a lot of anti-government fear back then, which, of course, has ended up in having a president who wants to clear the swamp or drain the swamp or whatever the
fear of government.
I think we are the swamp.
The fear of government has gone down. People are less afraid of government.
They're not as afraid of it as they were. They're more afraid about health and sort of car wrecks and stroke and heart disease. Well, which is fair enough, because heart disease is the biggest killer of all.
Well, there's a book from the 1980s that was very popular by the late German sociologist Ulrich Beck, called, in English, The Risk Society. And what he was saying is that you move from this period in the 50s and 60s of the idea that technology was going to create this great new world in which people would enjoy much higher standards of living and this and that and the other thing. Then after 3 Mile Island and then Chernobyl, lots of other increased consciousness about the environmental damage that all these technologies was causing, he identified a shift to the way people think about technology or the world as filled with all of these risks that government should protect you from. But it goes from an essentially positive vision, which had lots of problems, to an essentially negative vision, in which this world is a scary place and there are all these things that are going to poison you and do terrible things to you. So, and it tracks an increased pessimism, I think, in American culture as well. We don't think of technology as presented. Well, in the Bay Area, lots of people still do, but many people don't think of technology as a positive thing. They think of it as this thing that's going to give you cancer. It's going to destroy the water and the natural environment, et cetera. So it's just a big shift in the way people thought about the promise of all of these new technologies over the last 50 years, which is kind of interesting. Or take these panics about like vaccination, right? I mean, vaccination once this great promise.
Good
now
idea.
people are very anxious about it. Maybe rightfully so. I don't really know about it.
I think, one of my fears with technology is that we're going to lose some of, as human beings, so we're going to start to lose some of our brain power. We're not, kids are not necessarily even writing in some cases. It's all on computer. Spell check, grammar check, people, hand-eye coordination, activities, even in the arts, more and more digital processes are being used, and skills that artists used to have, graphic designers, sign painters, those big billboards used to be hand-painted.
Well, and James Rosenquist, who just died, the famous American pop artist who did the F-111, people remember some of his canvases. He was a sign painter. Actually, a lot of the pop artists came out of the world of illustration. Andy Warhol was an illustrator, et cetera. So those were skills that they had that they, used for, other things later in their careers.
Yeah,
I don't
had
think
an
you
uncle.
have to worry about hand-eye coordination.
No?
No.
You would with me.
Well, and then
think I
there's
have
also
about
the
Generation
issue
of gamers have
of job loss, Well, that's different. Hitting buttons, it's going to give you carpal tunnel, whatever. But
as a child, I couldn't do either. I was both terrible at sports and couldn't play video games. So what does that mean? Serious issues here.
I always feared sports, I have to say.
yeah,
Well, organized sports.
dodgeball was the worst.
climbing the fence.
Well, I was always the tallest in class, and so I'd always get put in goal for football, soccer, and there was a particularly nasty gym teacher who used to fire the ball directly at me on the coldest of mornings.
Oh, ouch.
Very nasty person he was. So, yes, I had no inkling to join in with the...
But being humiliated in front of a group.
Yes,
I mean,
there's a fear. There's a fear. The fear of public speaking, I think, still ranks up there as number one, and the fear of calling into a radio show, even a local radio show.
I had
call
that
in,
fear.
don't
I
you?
called into the show one time, and my heart really did start to race, in anticipation.
Well, public speaking used to be something that
And
was
yet we're
taught.
so kind.
Well, it used to be part of a kind of classical education that you would learn how to speak to strangers, to be able to articulate ideas to strangers, people who might have different opinions from you, and to engage in that way. And we've shifted from that as a kind of ideal of some sort of public life to conformity. You only talk to people who agree with you. In fact, in the show that preceded this one, someone had a note saying that how much they loved Siri, which is some kind of electric thing that talks to you.
The voice.
And yes, and so Siri had given them a sense of, comfort and security, and you're just like, oh boy. But yeah,
For one who never uses Siri,
who is a Siri person? I mean, I'm single. Is she single?
I have a man, a
Nobody
butler.
knows. She won't answer that
I
question.
have a British butler who answers mine. But I'd like to bring up something
Will
else.
there be anything else?
I think there are these fears that really change our behavior and affect our life. For example, fear of parental disapproval, or fear for some men, fear of being taken for being gay. People can get violent over things like that, or this parental behavior thing. people can change their lives to get approval from their parents and live lives they don't even want to live.
Of course.
Well, I used to, I guess the first instance you talk about fear of being identified as a homosexual, I remember I was walking with my friend who just visited, Josh Fishbein. Maybe some people met him. We both had really long hair at the time. And
are beautiful.
And yes, and we're very beautiful. We're walking together from Chelsea down to the West Village, and this huge guy passes us. I mean, just giant. I didn't take much notice of him until he passed, and he said, I believe you can still say this, you faggots are going straight to hell. And I was like, really? Really? And I looked, and he's walking toward Chelsea. I'm like, that guy's day is about to get worse. If he's upset about gay people, things are not going to improve there for him in Chelsea.
And so how does, that's part of the question, how do your fears change your behavior? I mean, are people now thinking about not going to, for example, the strictly bluegrass because it's a public event where there will be a crowd? And
I was at a
Vegas,
football game recently, and I did have the thought, here we are sitting ducks.
Yeah.
I mean, we see airplanes and drones flying over the stadium. It would be so easy for a whole huge crowd of people to be taken out all at once.
Well, I talked to somebody after this Las Vegas shooting over in Inverness. Should we name people? Name and shame? No.
No.
If you
No.
wish.
No shaming.
No, just name. Well, I was talking to, since I know they're not listening, if they are, please call in, 663-8492. I was talking to David Briggs, publisher of the Point Reyes Light, and I said, how did you react to that? And he said he was at a mall with his kids, and I think they went to a movie as well, somewhere over the hill. And he did have this sense in this big open public space, all these people, I mean, malls are just deeply perverse in so many ways, but he had the sense that, this is a really strange place where someone's going to come out and maybe start shooting at people, and so there was some tension and anxiety around that.
Right.
But, I mean, that's a weird part of the social contract that we haven't grappled with. I mean, presidents used to walk around in the mall, right? And presidents used to encounter actual people in actual life.
Shaking hands with men on the street.
And now it's almost impossible. I mean, it wasn't just the assassination of Lincoln, it was also McKinley, and so now, nobody can just wander on the mall.
Clinton used to go running in the morning.
He did have all of his security with him, though, I guess. But yeah, that was a part of the human touch. Part of why people found him so charismatic. Fair point. But you get less and less of that. I think you get less and less of us just being able to be in a public space.
It is, it is a kind of a sad thing when something happens that is very frightening, and it causes a complete shift in how we do things.
Yeah.
Laws get changed. Or people's behaviors just change.
Or there's an excuse for a greater security crackdown or whatever. Or
we've already heard that. Yeah, we've already heard that, we can't have these freedoms, right? Because if we have to have security over freedom. That's always a terrifying situation to be in.
Some conspiracy theorists, God, help me. Might even propose that some of these things happen in order to cause that very shift.
Sure, that's a very popular view, that the government wants to take everyone's guns away, so they stage these events.
The Reichstag fire theory, right? I mean, that's,
Or Remember the Maine, or the Gulf of Tonkin, or, they're endless. And they are really extraordinary, too. I mean, we even actually, on Let's Talk, somebody called in and said the Sandy Hook shooting was false. I was like, whoa, wow.
Well, call in again.
Call in again.
Yeah.
663-8492. Did Sandy Hook really happen?
Did Vegas really happen? In that case, call in, won't you? 663-8492, and keep it clean, please.
How about the fear of being afraid?
We have nothing to fear but fear itself.
Well, that is so stupid. What about
my goodness, they'll think I'm afraid.
I think that's crazy, the fear of fear itself. I mean, what about being exposed as a pedophile in the paper wrongly, or starvation?
Well, yes, exactly. Wrongful arrest.
Things.
I mean, here's a little tale.
Okay.
A personal tale that happened just this week.
Oh, indeed.
Also nothing to do with choice of the topic, but
Fresh, yeah.
It certainly has something to do with it. A rather fearful older lady in a house next door to the one I am currently working on called the sheriff on me because she thought she saw me leaving a shed. There are several sheds nearby,
Two sheds.
Two sheds. Jackson lives there apparently. There's a toilet in one, which is what the local contractors use when they're working on the house. It's kind of the communal toilet, which the owner says, yes, fine. And there's another shed that has all kinds of stuff in there that I'm using. And so apparently she saw me coming out of one of the sheds and immediately called the sheriff and said I was stealing from her shed. And so two sheriff's deputies arrive, and there I am with a power tool in my hand, right? I mean...
Looks a bit like a gun.
It looks a bit like a gun. You know, had I not been this ridiculous-looking, bearded old white guy, what if I'd been one of the subcontractors has a helper who doesn't speak English? What if I'd been that guy wandering around with a screwdriver, with a
power screwdriver,
in his hand when these guys turn up? Not that Marin County sheriffs are prone to that, but that's an example of where overreaction, fear of the unknown, or fear of strangers, or whatever, can have ramifications. Nothing happened to me. It was just a waste of half an hour while we got it all figured out.
I think it also goes both ways. You have African Americans who are afraid when they're stopped by the police, and vice versa. The police are very afraid of everyone when they stop someone. That's a huge fear.
Well, my brother predicted in the financial crisis now 10 years ago. He said you will see an increased incidence of attacks on police for some very good reason. You look at some of these tickets for running a blinking red light or things like that. Well, it's $500. So you've just taken somebody's groceries away for the month. You've just taken away their ability to pay their rent, etc. So you put people in an extreme position. And the likeliness of violence increases, and
especially when it's on purpose.
Well, I think there's a feedback loop here that's happening in terms of poverty and the extreme conditions that people are forced to live in, and the police and their trigger happy or trigger happy. We need to get involved with that. Doug Pittman, don't come down to the station and shoot me. Or just the increased tension that people feel. Or the police feel as well.
Of course. Everyone's at danger in that situation.
So we're talking about fear here on KWMR. 663-8492. What are you afraid of, Wes Marin?
Have you changed your behavior in any way because of the fears? I mean, are you scared of flying and therefore don't fly? How do you get around? How do you go and visit the grandchildren? Is that one of your fears? Fear of your grandchildren getting sick? I mean, all that stuff. This is from 2014. Things Americans feared the most then: walking alone at night, becoming the victim of identity theft, safety on the internet, see, it's all different, being the victim of a mass or random shooting, and number 5, public speaking. And then there were things that...
How about calling into a radio program?
Exactly. I mean,
very high.
Fear of public speaking.
Well, and it's very...
Top 5 things people are concerned, they're worried about. I guess that's a little different from actual fear and phobia. Having identity stolen on the internet, again. Corporate surveillance, running out of money. There's a fear. Government surveillance of internet activity, and becoming ill, just kind of generally. And then, of course, there's all the fear of natural disasters, one of which includes power outage as a natural disaster.
Well, anyway. Fear suggests to me something a little bit more abstract, a little bit more sort of to do with the unconscious or something like that. What I think we have are overwhelmed with in this culture is anxiety. Anxiety that comes from the fear of an inability to pay a bill, anxiety that comes from job insecurity, anxiety, whatever it is. And so it's not fear exactly. It's more immediate. When I think of fear, I love Freud's interpretation of the fear of death, which is that it's people are afraid they're not actually alive. People tell me they're afraid of death. I think, oh, really? So
what's the difference between fear and concern?
Well, fear suggests irrationality, I think, in some sense, right? People who are afraid of things that are not really a threat to them. So a fear of
clowns,
spiders.
Clowns.
That
I see it.
I think that's completely justified. Oh,
no. So I think we would.
do you get people?
Well, I've done some
Crying
clowning.
with fear as you walk in?
Yeah.
You're a clown, Shelley? I did not know this about you.
Yeah.
The red nose was a bit of a giveaway, but I didn't. She is in full makeup, I should point out. I just didn't know why. I thought it was,
I did a
Sunscreen.
show one time. I was the host of the show, and there were 10 acts, and the last act was to be an onslaught of clowns.
Onslaught, is that really the word?
Is that the collective?
It's a perfect word for this. And there was someone in the audience that I discovered had a fear of clowns, and she had sat in the front row, and I said, maybe you don't want to sit there. I was trying to, clue her in. And she decided she was going to sit it out. So over the course of the show, I slowly became a clown. Started out, normal person, and then came in with a little more makeup, a wig, outfit, And so by the 10th act, I joined in with the clowns. And the interesting thing was that it was major immersion, in clown. And these were wild clowns running amok. And she got over her fear that night.
There. See? A little
So
therapy.
immersion,
You helped her dip her
in
toes.
facing your fear. And so another thing I wanted to bring up about fear is that fear can actually be a positive thing. That
sure.
Absolutely.
that really fear is there to keep us safe.
Right.
And so if you look at this in terms of, your life and your personal growth, sometimes the thing we're afraid of, like public speaking, might be the thing that we need to go towards, because if we weren't afraid of it, it wouldn't be something that mattered to us, right? But if we're afraid of it, maybe we actually want to do it.
Ah.
And
Or we should.
And that's something to recognize, that fear is keeping you safe, but it's also telling you, hey, you kind of are curious about that.
It has some meaning for you, yeah.
Yeah, if you can go towards that fear, that you can actually really grow and
The encounter with it, I think, is humiliation, and that's what people are kind of told to avoid, or sort of conditioned to avoid. Don't move into that thing that humiliates you and come out on the other side of it. That the idea that humiliation itself has no function or purpose.
or failure.
Or
Right.
failure
Fear
being
of
this
failure,
function of humiliation. So
Right.
people would say, why would you want to go into that space?
So you can learn.
Well, and
Yeah.
so, but I think we don't do a lot of learning. I think we do a lot of avoiding those kinds of topics.
Well, I'm personally on a mission to help people understand failure as a teacher.
I'm just, as an
I really
example,
believe in
I'm
that.
trying to help people understand.
Speaking of humiliation, though, we have these deep, dark fears that we would never share with anyone.
Go ahead.
Now, shoot.
I had the fear
Come on,
of
Stephen.
sounding stupid on the radio.
You've already overcome that.
No,
What's
but
next?
go ahead. So deep, dark fears. So you don't want
Why
to share.
should I
so
tell you?
you're afraid of exposing your fears.
That's what all these people at home who are not calling 663-8492
Being in
are
my
thinking.
underwear in school.
Okay, that's enough now.
That's a classic. That was the West
Yes,
Marin
of
School
course.
last Tuesday, and he does apologize.
Those terrible dreams. Terrible dreams where you're naked in public. Oh, no.
Well, so
Fear of humiliation.
Well, but dreams, though, what aspect do they play when it comes to fears?
I mean, you mean
question.
actual dreams when you're sleeping at night? Or?
Yeah,
Are they?
don't our fears show up sometimes
Do you
when
have
you're dreaming?
Sure,
fear? Do you have? Are you ever attacked in your dreams? I mean, are you ever-
Well, I was last night, funnily enough, because I've started to leave the window open so the cat can go inside now at night, which is wont to do. And then, but the raccoons will come in. So I
course.
literally, half awake, half asleep, I think, said out loud, "Get out of here, raccoons!" There was nobody there. The cat was there, but I was sort of half asleep. So I think we have a sort of problem solving, or a sort of immediate level of dreams, and And then we have the sort of hallucinatory psychosexual dreams that we identify with deeper sleep and sort of deeper problems than raccoons getting in. Your grandmother crawling up your leg with a knife in her teeth. That
fear
sort
of attractive people. That there's a fear
of attractive people.
Yeah.
I've suffered from this all my life. It's
Yes, me too. Oh, my. And Shelley, of course. Stephen.
fear of hair.
well, we're on radio. It's fine. 663-8492. Do call. Tell us what you're afraid of. Why do you think people are afraid of these things? We know lots of people listen.
Fear of certain disabilities.
Yes, that's definitely one for me.
I worked at an organization that served people with disabilities, and there was one fella there who had been born with half of his skull was missing, no eye, and so they built his skull, and he had a glass eye. His head was a little crooked, like a little off kilter. He had a weird patch of hair, on an otherwise mostly bald head, and he was so friendly. He would come in close, and he spoke kind of funny on the side of his mouth, and it was really hard to understand.
What is this character?
I mean, I'm trying to describe this to you because
Good job, by the way.
I had a really hard time at first being able to look at him,
Right.
understand him, communicate with him, and then eventually, and again, here's immersion. Eventually, that went away. But I had to notice that. I had to acknowledge, oh wow, I'm having a hard time with this.
And why is it a hard time? Because you're unsure of how to act around him, or because there's some latent fear of it happening to you somehow? I wonder what that is.
Yeah, I don't think I was afraid I was going to catch it or anything.
Yeah, right.
I think it was more just an awkwardness, uncomfortableness, uncertainty about how, difficulty understanding, and not wanting to make him feel bad because I am repeatedly saying, what? I don't understand.
Right. And yet he's lived with that his whole life.
Right.
And is totally aware of it. And
He's lived with the fact that people are afraid of him.
yeah.
Probably.
Well, you probably get used to it at some point. I mean, Ivan Illich died of a terrible tumor that was sort of growing out of the side of his face, and my friend who became acquainted with him said, it was really horrible to behold. It was you had to get over your revulsion at this. But then lots of, the elimination of different creatures is sort of, like the African cultures that kill albinos and whatever. I mean, there's why pick on Africa?
So differences.
Yeah.
Can,
fear of the
xenophobia.
Yeah.
Xenophobia.
If you went to a small village in Africa, would they be afraid of the same things? Certainly not government take over their identity.
Yeah, maybe government takeover in some of it.
Yeah, exactly. Just physical government takeover. I don't know. I mean, we do that too. I mean, the thing, a lot of people treat the sort of, and kind of sort of pleasantness and easiness of whatever kind of socializing goes on in West Marin. You look at it, at the first approximation, we are basically identical. There is everyone's white. There's some degree of privilege going on there, or lesser or greater, depending on who we're talking about. And so the ease that we have here and the relative safety, et cetera, is maybe there's so little difference that we encounter. There's so little diversity. So it's, I don't know.
Maybe it makes us all
You know what I find very
easy.
interesting is that it's easier to tell your life story or your fears to the person that's sitting next to you on an airplane flight that you don't know, or
anonymity.
Open your heart with the Uber driver. I had that once. She was helping me solve my problems. It was actually pretty good.
This is what
Did you give her a
bartenders
good
used to
tip?
do.
That's what I want to know.
Yes, I did.
Oh,
Well, I think that
She
is
earned it.
It's
No, but you're not supposed to tip at all on Uber.
Oh.
it's a really
It's
serious.
not permitted.
What's a really serious problem, I think, is why people have better relationships with their pets than other human beings, because we have a tremendous fear of betrayal. And I think it comes from that thing of not wanting to encounter the humiliation that occurs when you do expose yourself to someone that you know. I love that phrase. I'm going to expose myself to some people that I know later. See you at the Court Wayside office. Get your camera ready, David. And that's really hard. But I mean, the poignancy of those deep and lasting relationships that human beings can have is connected to this idea of that the depth to which we'll be, or the degree to which we're willing to be vulnerable.
Vulnerability.
And so that's very hard for people to do. And people get burned a lot, right? People have relationships that don't work out. They have bad relationships with their parents, as you were saying, Stephen.
And people hold it against you.
Remind you. Are you going to say something about your sons here? Oh, look at this, a flashing light.
Sometimes there's a fear of telling your personal truth to someone that you love because you're afraid they're
going to reject you.
Rejection, fear of rejection.
There's that fear of vulnerability. And caller, please hang on for just a moment here. I have to do a station ID. This is KWMR 90.5 Point Radio Station, 89.9 Bolinas, 92.3 San Geronimo Valley. And we are supported by our listener members and by Zenith Instant Printing in Novato, serving the community since 1975. Zenith Instant Printing helps with printing and mailing projects from concept to completion or anywhere in between. 415-897-0454. That's 415-897-0454. Or online at zenithinstantprinting.com. And we're also supported by To Celebrate Life Breast Cancer Foundation, raising funds to help underserved women and men living with breast cancer. Through its Bay Area Breast Cancer Grants Program, the foundation supports nonprofits that provide direct and emergency services and believes that no one should face breast cancer alone. Information about how to get involved in it is available at tocelebratelife.org. And have you been to KWMR's website lately? Our donate page has a new feature called Tip This Show, where you can make a donation to a specific show. We then let the host know that you showed them some love. Check out the Tip This Show feature next time you're on KWMR.org. No, next time, go there immediately and tip this show. And caller. Hello, caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
My name is Corinne, and I have tremendous fear waiting for you to be finished.
Hey, I feel you.
And I was afraid this would turn into a 2-hour program.
I'm anxious that my phone will run out of juice. Anyway,
yes.
I'm Fred and I out here in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. I'm sitting here looking at a beautiful view. I've often looked at this fear thing, and many years ago I learned in a seminar that the worst thing about fear is fear itself. And I often think about that when I get the fear, like let go of the fear, because fear is just it's a fantasy of negativity, and that's pretty much what I had to say. I just feel like I don't have time for fear. It's more like just what is fear? Fear it's just your negative imagination, your negative. Yeah, you can come up with all kinds of reasons for fear, and question government, for example. Mm-hmm. But I can't allow myself to go into it because there's not much I can do about it. So be in the moment, enjoy your friends, enjoy the view, enjoy whatever. Because I think fear, it's more the fear of fear itself.
Yeah, that's
my bottom line,
And don't worry about that snake that is even now inching its way towards you, behind you. But
good Lord, well, that was a loaded image. I would say, isn't this just the carefree Danes and their joie de vivre that we're hearing? Can we talk to an uptight Swedish farmer from northern Sweden, maybe, about his anxieties?
Well, the uptight. Up to his farmer. I don't know if he's a farmer, but he's sitting in the car. I'm sitting outside.
Lovely. No, but the thing is, fear can be debilitating, right? I mean,
it can be. I mean, I know at times in my life I've had that thing, and then I thought, and then you have a fear of whatever is going to happen, and then it didn't happen. And I said, oh shoot, I should wasted my time on that one, And I think as you get older, you kind of like, okay, you have different meetings or different appointments. See, how am I going to manage to do them all? And then somehow, if you just breathe and let it organically unfold, it's just somehow it falls into place.
Well, I have a fear of heights.
Consistently.
I have a fear of heights, so it's okay for me to stay away from the edge.
Hold on to the railing. It's like I have a little bit of fear. When I get too high, I have to stay away from the edge. I used to have, when I was younger, a fear of that I would jump.
Yes, that's
that
right.
feeling, it would suck me in, and that came from a childhood thing, being in a roller coaster when I lost my ice cream, and I was kind of, I see the ice cream go down. So I don't go in roller coasters very much.
Fair
you
enough.
seem to say, tough it up. You're this, it's like, it's not a real fear, just get over it. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, I have a practical solution, Stephen. You can give me your place on the hillside, and you can have mine down in the bay. Much less worry about falling. If you do fall, mostly into water. So what do you say?
I haven't
afraid
seen
of the
your
water,
place. I
too.
might be up for it.
Okay, there we go.
Does it smell like cigarettes?
But he might drown.
Maybe it smells like cigarettes. He might drown. That's a
Yeah,
good point. I hadn't
he
thought
might
about that.
drown.
I'm not afraid of water. Some people
What
are.
about sharks?
It never crossed my mind.
So, Corinne, you just said that you don't go on roller coasters anymore. So you have.
Let me tell you, I used to be like terrified of them. I wouldn't go. And then many years ago, my daughter and Fred, because they like roller coasters, and they took me in the one in Santa Cruz, and I sat in the middle because I really want to overcome that terror that I would jump out. And I allowed myself to scream and carry on and stuff. And it's much better.
Ah, excellent.
And now I've done that. Now it's done that. I don't need to do it again.
Yeah.
Kind of like I did that jump over the fear thing, and then I said, I've done it. I don't need to do it again.
Well done. Yeah, well, I mean, it's not like we need to go on a roller coaster, for example.
When I'm on a trail down in the Grand Canyon, I should just scream and yell.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just carry on and then move on.
I see.
Well, thank you, Corinne. Thank you for calling in
So
from.
we are out here for Fred's high school reunion. So
Oh, boy.
it's kind of so we're seeing all the places where he used to hang out and be crazy.
Well, that would be scary to me going back to a high school reunion, but there you go.
Anyhow,
Thank you so much.
To you, but thank you.
See you soon, Corinne.
Take
Well,
care.
that's interesting. Fear and scary.
Ah.
How do they relate?
Well, because being scared of
Scary
something
is
could be
just a-
perfectly rational. I mean, it's
Fear of snakes, fear of heights. I think these are all perfectly rational. If they become too strong, too overwhelming, that you're deathly afraid of going anywhere
What if
near
it becomes
a
crippling?
ladder, for example.
Yeah.
If it's a crippling fear, then that's something that needs to be perhaps faced. But
How high does the ladder
But I mean, you should be afraid of heights because it's not the height; it's the
falling.
what happens when you get to the bottom. Right?
Some people have more physical courage than others. I can think of a story where Matt Kyler, to get to the top of Richard Raspini's barn, put a table in the back of his truck and a 40-foot ladder on top of the table to get that height.
Hello, caller. Yes, you're on the air. What's your name, please? And keep it clean if you can.
All right, Paul. Thank you. Okay, in Seattle.
Oh, MK, my darling.
Hi. I saw your announcement yesterday of what the subject was going to be today, and I thought, oh, goody, I'll make a list. So I started making a list, and it got shorter and shorter.
Ah.
And I think the only fear I really have is being buried alive.
Hey.
That's the only one. And because I was thinking, you fear having a debilitating disease, and then you get one and you deal with it. And then you getting older, and I don't know, maybe you just run out of pep or steam or something and don't have time or the energy to put into being afraid. And by the way, we call it fear of landing in our house.
Yes.
The fear of heights. Anyway, that's kind of where I am.
Well, what do you make of Freud's point that, again, these people who claim that they're afraid of death are actually afraid that they're not living, and they're not alive in some way?
Well, that's possible. That's probably very true in this culture.
And there's an obsession over health, which seems to me to be an inability to grapple with aging and dying. It seems to be a problem.
Yeah, I've played fast and loose with my health for my whole life, and I've done really well until I'm in my mid-70s, and now I've got Parkinson's and whatever else. And you deal with it, and you put up with it, but I went, Stephen, I went and got my eyes done in June, and I'm very glad I did, and wasn't afraid of that.
Me neither.
And I don't know. It's. I think people must like being afraid.
Well, there's a frisson, right?
Well,
There's the thrill, the adrenaline rush when you're close to something that you're afraid of.
Well,
Scary movies?
Freddy Krueger movies. I've never seen any of those movies.
no, and those are
I'm not going
Seen
to.
them, but I just think that being alive is scary enough without that.
well.
I don't need that extra terror stimulation. I've got a good imagination, which may be part of it.
But
people are just dull.
Two questions. Well, one is just is there a fear of of the elderly in this culture? So I see a lot of wisdom in what I'll, at the risk of being beaten up when I leave the station, call elderly people in a place.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, who you call an elderly buddy, kid? In West Marin, there's there's tremendous wealth in older women and older men of wisdom, and it sort of gets ignored. I don't see it being celebrated very much.
There's an old saying that cultures that don't respect their children and elders are doomed, and I think that's true, because there is a great deal of wisdom, if that's what you call it, that happens to us older folks from having simply been alive and paying attention.
Doesn't seem like there are some fears, though, are abstract, but there are these others that change your life. Those fears interest me. Those ones.
What?
Well, fear of black people, for example. Some people would cross the street if they see three guys coming.
Yeah.
I take the other side of that, which is,
it depends on where you are, too.
Well, I have this experience. You say you go to the Powell Street bar or something like that, and you see young black men who are the majority of the people in this culture want to be invisible, even from within their own culture. There is no employment. There's the educational opportunities are really poor. Nobody knows what to do with the energy of these young black men, and they know that they're invisible in this culture. So when they fill the sidewalk, or if they're loud and threatening in some way, or just boisterous, it's saying, "Look, I'm not invisible. You have to recognize me. You have to pay attention. I'm here." Is what I get from it. But that is trying to get your attention. That is trying to make you acknowledge in some way their presence.
And that's very frightening.
I don't think people cross the street for little old black ladies, walking down the street.
Well, there was an incident in Napa on the wine train. There was a large group of black women on the train who were enjoying themselves. And some of the people on the train decided they were enjoying themselves too much, and they needed to get off the train. And it really is, train. I think, yeah, right. And they were whining on the wine train. And it's, part of it's cultural differences. Yeah. You might perceive it as they're being obnoxious, but in that culture, that's, it's like we had an incident with somebody locally who got angry and got on the phone and just endlessly screaming. And we were told that this was because of his culture.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's one time.
Gosh, Charles.
I just don't see the cultural connection. I'm sorry.
Well, I would just say this. There's a lot of latent tension in the culture, absolutely. I know people who unironically use racial epithets in West Marin in a very serious way. There's a lot of latent anti-Semitism and a latent sort of fear of black people or dislike of them here as well. The interesting thing about how peaceful and wonderful we are as a culture is that you never encounter that difference if you don't want to. You never have to be in the presence of this other that makes you uncomfortable. So what people call our sort of niceness or something like that, I think, well, it's untested. We'll see. We'll see how nice we are if, suddenly there were lots of poor families from very different backgrounds.
There's some tall guy with a white beard walking around.
Well, that he should have been arrested.
Exactly. So, MK, yeah, so...
are in West Marin right now. I'm coming down there next week, so I'll see you guys.
Oh, great.
It's people are edgy now. There's a lot of stuff going on that's really worrisome that we don't really have much control over, and I think there's an extra layer of angst across the board.
Right,
I really do, and I live in a city, but so it's.
Yeah, there's a mechanism in action to divide us and to see each other as the other.
Not doing such a bad job.
Yeah, they're very good at it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just, all of these problems that, again, the coastal elites really haven't had to grapple with in any meaningful way in the last 40 years are now it's all flooding but that tension, those problems of poverty for the majority of Americans have been growing for 40, 50 years. So now we're aware of it. Suddenly say, oh, where did all this come from? But I think it's been there. Now, I mean, I guess being aware of it is not a bad thing. But I would say about stress and anxiety, people do become addicted to it. It is the way they control how they feel about themselves. It becomes this thing that if they can just keep stress on themselves, if they can fill up all of their
really
time.
hard on your body.
Yeah.
And your mind.
It really is. And yeah, but I think they're like cancer, and a lot of those illnesses have been proven to be stress-related.
Well, I'm going to be cancer-free then, I got to tell you. That's
me too.
Great.
Well, thank you, MK.
Have a happy day.
Thank you for calling.
Thanks for calling.
You too.
Take care, MK. So you're listening to Let's Talk, 663-8492. What are you afraid of?
Yes. What are you afraid of? Us? Ha! Don't be afraid. Call in. We won't judge you. Ha!
Well, the funny thing is how open and nice everybody's supposed to be to each other. This is this terror of expressing yourself on the radio. I mean, can people call in anonymously? Oh.
Of course they can. Yeah, you can give us any name you like. Oh, excuse
Biff
me.
is
Oh dear.
Biff. Call yourself
Okay.
Biff.
That was my mistake. Sorry about that.
663-8492. Call. Tell us what you're afraid of. And why?
And to Kareen's point and to MK's point, partly, as we age, we have less time for fear.
I get both
feels
things.
like, or there's just enough experience that we know how to get around our fears, or we don't put ourselves in those situations anymore because
certainly less fear of worrying about what other people think.
Right.
That's a big one.
I would hope, but I see people in their 80s who can reasonably foresee, the end of their lives, who simultaneously do possess that wisdom, also possess the feeling of having lived for, over 8 decades, that they're ready to let go of so many things in their life, but still are not pleased by the prospect of dying.
I think this being out of control also. I mean, 1 minute somebody's enjoying a music festival, the next minute she's waking up in the hospital paraplegic. That's frightening that could happen to any of us in one way or another. Maybe not that way, but you can get an automobile accident.
Yeah, that deer
destroys your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, things that happen
I'm afraid
in
of
a
that.
heartbeat. Yeah.
But these things are all pretty unlikely, too. I mean, the 90s saw all those moral panics, Satanists and pedophiles and all of these things. The incidence of these things is actually really low.
Right.
The likelihood, so somebody like The Guardian published, there have been 1,500 shootings in 1,700 days in the United States. It's a country of 320 million people.
Right.
So the odds of being shot, a much higher likelihood in the United States of having an overdose, dying in a car. Dying of cancer. I mean, it's pretty low. I mean, I'm not saying, okay, that's great that we have these mass shootings. Obviously, it's not. But it is more how it creates something in our mind that, now people feel this anxiety when they go into public spaces. But it's very unlikely that anybody's going to shoot you.
Yeah, exactly. And growing up in London, the
IRA was
60s
bombing.
And 70s, they were bombing everywhere,
right through
all
the 90s.
the time, and you just go, well, here's the odds. What are the odds of anything happening to me? What are you going to do? You're going to. You could move to the country, I guess, but people need to go about their lives.
Think if you're a germaphobe, right?
Yeah.
You're afraid of germs. You could not live in New York City. You could not think about what happens when you get onto a subway if you hold on to if you're a strap hanger or just breathing the air. So we do a lot of disavowing these things that if you were really frightened, you would not be. You would be totally paralyzed. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, the impact on the environment of the combustion of fuel for transportation. Is that going to stop me from driving today? No.
But we're talking. Yeah. We're just not talking about normal fears of whether they should put their hand on the
strap hangers on the subway?
Yeah, when they're leaving the bathroom, whether they should put a
rag. The KWMR key? Do we need to talk about your fear of the KWMR bathroom key? Stephen Hurwitz, I ask you. You've expressed this before.
Yes, I think we do. I'm hanging that
Do you use hand sanitizer?
Do I know? But I saw a woman in the airport who had a young child who was crawling all over the floor, and she did have one, and she cleaned his hands off, and I don't think that was inappropriate.
Right.
Well, I believe in germs myself as making me healthy.
I can see that.
Well, they used to call you a peck of dirt.
But whether you
pig pen.
But whether you're in a public place like the airport where thousands of people come, and who knows what they've been walking on. I just think it's appropriate.
Well, it spreads disease all over the world, right?
But
we get Asian
of fear
flus
can be
every
appropriate.
year. Well, sure. I mean, we get Asian flus every winter, right? We get these flu strains that develop in the Far East, and because, for instance, I went to a big state college that had a large number of international students from Asia, and sure enough, they'd go home for Christmas or whatever and come back, and then,
a brand new strain.
There'd be a big flu outbreak that January. So part of all this moving around destroys biodiversity, spreads disease, all of that too. But it's also deeply embedded in our culture. Very difficult for me to say to grandparents or parents, like, look, stop flying around all the time, because that's the way they maintain their connection with their families. So it's a difficult thing to talk about.
The opposite is true. You can ask, what aren't people afraid of?
What do you think? What aren't we afraid of, Stephen? 663-8492.
Give us a call.
What aren't
Tell
you
us
afraid
what
of?
you're not afraid of.
I don't walk around in fear that the bomb's going to go off in the public square. Those fears, I'm not afraid of going into large public spaces just because there's been a mass shooting there. I'm not afraid of that.
So I think what was taught to me living in London in that time when the bombings were going on was to always be aware of your surroundings. And I guess you're kind of always checking for exit routes and things. But living out here for 25 years, you wonder what will happen when you meet the mountain lion. And
well, that's the same
you
thing.
look forward to it.
Do you look big? Don't run. It's just a way of dealing with things that are going to come up, perhaps. Who knows if it's ever going to happen? But you're aware of what's going on. You're conscious of your surroundings. You're conscious of people's actions, and conscious of if you're out in nature and you're worried about being attacked by a bear, you're looking for signs of bear, right? I mean, it's what you do. It's how you cope with.
I just thought of a weird fear, and the fear, and I think particularly for women, can be the fear of being friendly to the wrong person.
Yes.
Because it can lead to things like, for example, one time I was at a gas station filling up my car, and another man was filling up his car right on the other side of the pump, and I just simply said, hello.
Oh, boy.
And the next thing I know, he's followed me out of the gas station and down the street, and I made a break for it. But, as a woman, there's been a number of incidents of people sort of creepily following, and so that idea that you do have to kind of head up, eyes up and out, looking around and looking for, where do I go?
Yeah. It's not over vigilance. I don't think it's just being aware, really.
Well, you're talking about gender specific.
Yeah.
But you're right. Gender specific women have different fears than men.
They can.
Yes,
I mean, things
and
can
women
happen
should be afraid of men. Let's face it, statistically, right? I mean,
well, I think the thing
one
is,
in 3 women have been assaulted by men.
Over the last 60 years, you've seen this big opening of public life to women that they were not allowed into previously, and it's come with what I'll call, maybe inappropriately, all these kind of growing pains, which is understanding what it means to be a single woman alone in public spaces. And I mean, there is a predatory aspect to maybe male sexuality, but you could also say they're psychotic people too. There may be something about the chase and sexual relationships between men and women. The same impulses in a psychotic individual become rape and assault and following people around. And although I did have an Irish friend, she was a lovely woman. She said to me once, "Well, Charlie, I'd stalk him, but I don't have a car." So I thought that was very nice. I could use some more stalkers. So there are many ways. What's your address? Oh, gracious! Good Lord!
But there's the thing of which I am always conscious of when I go even to San Francisco, downtown, and everything's fine. You don't do things like stand on a corner and look at a map and look around and go, "Oh, where am I?" with your fanny pack and
Well, on the other
full
hand,
of cash.
On the other hand, people can be very friendly.
Yes,
I didn't know my way around New York subway. This guy just I just was sitting next to me. He gave me great directions. We had a great conversation. Nobody looks in anybody's eye there. It takes somebody out of town to actually break through that, and it turns out it's not so bad. But I think that Charles has a fear of being taken seriously.
Oh dear! Well-founded fear of taken seriously.
No.
Completely rational fear. No, I mean you get to as the outsider, you get to see lots of things that insiders don't see, but it doesn't mean anybody wants to listen to it. So. There you go. But I would say the iPhone thing now means that nobody is making eye contact, and young people aren't learning the cues, the nonverbal cues, and the way people communicate, and the way you know you're in a dangerous situation, not a dangerous situation.
Totally blanking out everything that's going on around them.
Well, the affect is flattening, in all of these people, and it makes them more fearful. It means that there are more situations they're not going to have the courage to get into. There are more things that they're not going to try because we've become more and more sort of isolated and lonely, even though we're still going out in public spaces, even though people still think of themselves as having a public life. Mostly it's this inward-looking thing.
I think that's conjecture.
Oh, well, sure. You haven't read my paper on this?
Everyone's walking around with their heads down.
Well,
I don't think it has the effect that Charles just described.
You don't think that my generation has more social anxiety? I think they do, in a way, in terms of going into situations that are maybe foreign and maybe complex. What I see is that people become more conformist. I think it's a result of age-graded education as well, and class. We should always remember class. But I see people congregate on the basis of actually a mutual anonymity, what I call group loneliness. And so they know they want to go into spaces where they know nobody's going to ask certain kinds of questions.
Well, obviously, you can be lonely in a group more easily than
New York City is a great example of that.
Yeah.
The conductor, Kurt Mazur, who passed away, he said, and he moved to New York and was working as a conductor there, that for the first 6 months he thought he was terribly lonely, and then he realized everybody's lonely in New York. And in a way, that's right.
Anonymity, and that's why, some people who move out to places like this, West Marin, get slightly paranoid about everyone knowing
their
everything that's going on.
So
with
much
their life.
gossip.
They cannot be anonymous.
I know all of your business, and I'm going to tell.
Anyway, thank you all. I want to thank our listeners and our callers today. I hope you'll tune in every Thursday at 11, because your voice matters to us. KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. This was Let's Talk Fear, and we'll be back next Thursday at 11.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you all.